Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. So many questions surrounding the coronavirus vaccine. Is it safe? Should I get it? What happens if I have a reaction? Does it really stop the spread of coronavirus? How soon can I get it? Should I trust the healthcare system since they made this vaccine so quickly? And particularly in the Black community, is this the modern version of the Tuskegee experiment? The best way to make an informed decision is to know the facts, and Dr. Keith Newby and Dr. Lauren James are here to keep it real. The vaccine and the Black community. That's next on Another View. Stay tuned.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Before we get started with our program today, all about the COVID vaccine, and I know you have lots of questions out there, so I'm going to give you the phone number right now, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Those are the numbers to call with your questions about the vaccine, about distribution, about how to get signed up, and all of that. But before I get to that, two things I want to tell you about that are happening in the community that I think you'll be interested in. The Virginia Beach City Public Schools is hosting a 2021 Black History program on February the 6th. So that's a week from Saturday. The theme of the virtual program, Reflection on a Legacy, Building for the Present Through Persistence, Perseverance, and Pride, will highlight the local history of African Americans in the city of Virginia Beach and the first school for African Americans in Princess Anne County. Now, registration is open to Virginia Beach City Public School students in grades 6 through 12, their parents and guardians, staff, and community members. You can find the link to register at vbschools.com. That's vbschools.com. And while the registration is for Virginia Beach residents, everyone is invited to view the opening and closing ceremonies on YouTube. And this will be the launch for a year-long project that Virginia Beach Public Schools will be involved in, which will involve current students interviewing the original 38 students who were eligible to integrate Virginia Beach Public Schools. So that we're looking at the younger generation and the older generation and seeing how their educational experiences differ and how they are the same. So go to vbschools.com and register for that event. And I hope you'll join me tonight, this afternoon actually, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. EVMS is hosting a community conversation about healthcare disparities in our area. And we'll be joined by representation from Old Dominion University, Norfolk State University, the Virginia Department of Health, Hampton Health District, Riverside Health System, and Centera Healthcare, and you. And we want to hear from you, the community, about the healthcare disparities that you see in our area. You can join the conversation live at evms.edu/community forum, or you can go to the EVMS Facebook page and ask your questions there. So that's tonight from 5:30 to 7. evms.edu/community forum or the EVMS Facebook page. And we hope to see you in the place. Thanks so much. So according to the Centers for Disease Control, more than half of COVID-19 cases in the U.S. have been among Black and brown people. Yet a recent poll done by the Pew Research Center shows that only 42% of African American adults say they will take the shot, compared to 63% of Latinos and 61% of white adults. Why the distrust, especially when the African American community is so impacted by this virus? For some answers, we're joined by our favorite cardiologist and Another View on Health contributor, Dr. Keith Newby. Hey, Dr. Newby, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Barbara?
I'm doing great. Thanks. It's so good to see you, and Happy New Year to you.
Same to you. Same to
And
you. Thanks for having me.
absolutely. And we welcome back to another view Dr. Lauren James. She's the District Health Director for the Portsmouth Health Department. Hello, Dr. James. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to
Period.
see you too. Absolutely. And Happy New Year to you too, since we haven't seen each other since the beginning of 2021. So we've got lots and lots and lots of questions. But Keith, we really kicked off. We've been talking about doing this show since the beginning of the month, actually, because you were so concerned about the distribution and what was happening from Richmond. So why don't you bring us up to speed on that concern and where we stand today?
Well, essentially, at the time this came up was in December, and I think we had talked a little bit at that time. I was told that I may not be able to get the vaccine until February, and as a frontline worker, of course, I had some concerns, and I brought it up to the governor's office and just said, listen, as much of us as frontline workers as we are, we want to make sure we're as protected and be able to protect our families. So that's kind of how this came up, and I'm at a point where I want to intercede and really try to get the vaccine myself. I've had, one of the biggest questions that I get almost every day now from every patient I see, with rare exception, is should I take the vaccine? And I try to explain to their office that I think in order to get people really in a mindset of taking it, especially in the African American community where there's already a distrust factor going on, that in order to do this, we needed to have individuals that patients trusted that was to give them, A, good advice, and B, that they had a friendly face when they were about to do something they were somewhat uncomfortable about receiving. Mm-hmm. So I said, one of the best ways I think to get people vaccinated is to include us as frontline people and people who have outpatient practices as a way of encouraging patients and getting them to proceed. So that's kind of how things started. Since that time, we are able to acquire. Now, the unfortunate reality is the vaccine quantities are not as robust as we like to see them, but my hope is, I know President Biden I heard, bought 200 million doses to distribute, but that hasn't occurred as of yet. But I think once that happens and we can kind of really open things up, that's going to be better. But in the interim time, we do have access to it in our practice, but again, we're only getting limited supply right now. But our hope is that extends out, that we are able to get more individuals involved and vaccines, really distributed. So that's kind of what led us up to now, is just my having a lot of concern that my African-American brothers and sisters were not taking the vaccine and didn't want to take it for various reasons and various rumors that we had to dispel. And that's kind of where we are right now.
Dr. James, the latest rumor I heard, and I heard this in a community meeting the other night that I was involved in, where they were, and then I saw an article in the paper that with the death of Hank Aaron, that the reason that he died was because he took the shot. He was in his 80s, late 80s, and they say that according to the article that I read, his doctors say he died of natural causes, but this rumor has just spread like wildfire, particularly through the Black community. How do we overcome those types of fears so that we can convince enough people to take this virus, especially as badly as the African American community and the Latino community, for that matter, have been impacted by COVID?
I think that's a very good point that you make. And I think that we have to continue to educate ourselves. And, as Dr. Newby said, have trusted professionals within our community participating. And we have to remember that to be a part of the process is to receive, improved health. So vaccines are the best tool we have. It's not perfect. I did receive the vaccine, and I had some some pain at the site, mild fatigue the next day. So your body is going to have a reaction. And, most likely you will not have a severe reaction. I'm not familiar with the Hank Aaron article, unfortunately, but I think it's just deciding that as a community, we will inform ourselves and trust but be a part of the process, because really, if we aren't even open to educating ourselves and getting vaccinated, we aren't engaging to be safer in our communities.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times it might be someone who protects themselves, maybe their grandmother. So it's not just about the young, healthy people. It's about those who they come into contact. So it takes a community. It takes a village, right? So I think that's a good point that you bring up.
And Dr. Newby, the whole idea of getting the shot, the other question I have is, are there enough vaccines being distributed so that people in minority communities in particular can get access to it?
Well, that's going to be the problem, child, until that happens. I mean, from what I understand, there is only like 100,000 doses for the whole state of Virginia right now per week to distribute. So that's not a lot when you really think about the number of people we have in Virginia. And again, hopefully as the production ramps up, that will change. Mm-hmm. So it really is going to be just access right now to just get vaccine itself. But that's partly why we're all trying to help out, is to make sure we give people alternatives so they're not waiting in these long lines, because that's been the biggest problem I've heard from people telling me is this: they try to go to get it, they stand in a long line, they may or may not get it when they go, and that could be, I can only imagine, frustrating. You sit in line for several hours and then end up, anyway. Yeah. I know that's a mess. I want to comment one thing about the Hank Aaron issue real quick. One of the things that I've run into this problem with, and I get so frustrated with social media sometimes because, this is it's not regulated like we wanted to. You can put anything you want almost up there. And, you get these people, like I've seen somebody sent me a message about some so-called nurse practitioner who said, don't take the vaccine. And her face is all disfigured. And, I'm looking at this stuff. And then when some of my fraternity brothers sent it to me, of course, they always ask me, what do you think? And I said, this is nonsense. I said, firstly, we don't know who that is. I said, we don't even know if that's a real nurse practitioner. Secondly, any health professional who is worth their salt is not going to make a recommendation based on their own individual experiences. Just like I wouldn't either. I've taken both vaccine shots. I've not had any issues other than, like I say, a little bit of soreness at the site. That was it. I didn't feel anything else. I didn't have any other symptoms, no side effects, no nothing. So when you hear these kind of rumors like the Hank Aaron issue, or there's some doctor I heard in Florida or somewhere they say died 2 weeks after they got the shot. Well, the first question I asked, well, how do you know the shot made this person pass away? Almost anything can happen in 2 weeks. So why do we make it the assumption that their death was directly correlate with this vaccine? And I know that's just mostly fear that drives that ship. But I'm trying to tell people, and this is my standard comment I make. How many people you know are dying of COVID-19? How many people you hear are dying of the vaccine? Let the numbers speak for themselves. And we're talking about 3,000 people dying per day. I'm not hearing, Hank Aaron. So let's say on the offside chance it was that. I don't believe it was, but let's go on the offside chance it was. Okay, that's one. Name some others. You won't be able to do it. But I can tell you a whole mess of people who died from COVID-19. So to me, there's just no comparison to me of the risk of the vaccine versus the risk of what could happen if you catch this infection.
So I want to get down to the basics for a second, because I'm confused as to exactly what this vaccine does. Does it prevent you from getting COVID-19, or does it mitigate the symptoms like the flu shot does? So in other words, there's a possibility you could still get it, but the severity would not be as much. Who wants to take that one first?
Well, I can throw my little 2 cents worth in there, because I'm not as expert as certain other people on the phone, so I'll take the first stab. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've read in my research on this is that all you're doing is getting injected with a genetic code. Essentially, there's no part of the virus that's being injected in you like old-style vaccines where they would have to reproduce the virus and then they denature it and that was injected in you. The only thing this thing is recognized, and it picked a spike that's kind of characteristic of all coronavirus, or at least this COVID-19, is a spike that sits on the surface of the virus. This is a messenger RNA vaccine. So what it's doing is almost like it's communicating with your cell to tell. It's almost like I look at it like a foreman on a job. If you say a construction site and somebody says, okay, I need you to change this house to add this steeple up here. So somebody gives you a new set of plans that you say, okay, to make the steeple, we need to do A, B, C, D, or E. So guys, I need you to do this, that, and the other. That's essentially what this messenger RNA is doing. So it's telling your body to create this particular protein spike that sits on the surface of cells that the body recognizes as foreign. That's part of the COVID-19 infection. So that trains your body to build antibodies against that spike. That helps to prevent the disease process. Now, what I know I'm a little not 100% sure about is when you talk about preventing infection, preventing disease, what I do know is that you can prevent severe disease almost 100% with this. Mm-hmm. My understanding is you're preventing infection approximately 95%. However, what I understand we don't really know is whether or not can you get an infection and just be more asymptomatic. So in other words, you had the vaccine, somebody exposes you, you actually have the coronavirus in you, and you're totally asymptomatic. And the question becomes can you still spread that to someone else? So I think that's the one thing I'm not 100% sure about is that particular piece. Can you acquire it and be asymptomatic with it and then spread it to somebody else? My understanding is that's the part that I'm not 100% clear about or that's been clarified, but that's how I know the vaccine works. And it's only designed for maybe a few weeks to a month that you're creating this extra protein spike, and then that goes away, but your body still recognizes that spike as foreign. So when you're exposed to the virus, hence the antibodies start attacking it.
And Dr. Lauren, then is this going to be a vaccine that we have to take every year, like we have to take a flu shot every year, or is it a one and done or two and done?
That's a good point. So to my reading so far, it is very similar to the flu shot, but the average flu shot is only 50 to 60% effective. So the 2 doses is what gets us to the 95%. But to your point, it is in the same family. So I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I do think it probably will have to be a yearly vaccine. But it's too soon to tell. I like to keep a little bit of optimism, but I always enjoy following Dr. Newby because he answered that very well. I don't think I have any gaps to fill.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking about the coronavirus vaccine. We're here to answer your questions and also to dispel some rumors that you may be hearing about taking the vaccine or not, particularly in the African American community. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So in full disclosure, I've had my first shot. And I have a second shot scheduled for the middle of February. And I was told by another doctor that the second shot is usually a little bit worse and I should take some sort of ibuprofen or acetaminophen or something prior to taking the second shot to mitigate some of those symptoms. But there's an article on ABC this morning where they're saying don't do that because that can slow down the efficacy of the vaccine itself. Do you guys have any thoughts either way about that? And Dr. Newby, since you've had both your shots now, right? Did you have any different effect?
Actually, no. I mean, I did take 2 Tylenol before I did it because I heard the same thing. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting. I had a patient that I saw that morning when I was taking it that night, and he told me he had his second shot maybe 4 or 5 days ago. And he says, Doc, he said, be honest with you, the second one was easier than the first one. He said, I didn't really feel much from the first one, but I didn't feel anything on the second one. And I'll be honest with you, it was kind of the same for me. Everybody told me I was going to have all this stuff. I'd get fever, chills, and all this stuff. And I didn't get anything. I mean, maybe I'm just lucky or blessed. I'll take either one.
Yeah.
But I didn't have. I had nothing. Really nothing. I thought, because I always have my caffeine headache when I don't drink coffee. After I took the first shot that morning, when I was rushing to get out of the house and I didn't get my coffee, so I had a headache. a little later that day, and I wasn't sure that was my caffeine withdrawal headache or the vaccine. But once I had my coffee in later that day, I was fine.
You okay?
So so I didn't have any issue. I was jumping up and down for joy because everybody had, I thought I was going to have to take the next day off, but I didn't have any problems at all.
Yeah, and I didn't have any problems with my shot. Even my arm, it was a little bit sore, but only if I happened to touch it. It wasn't something that I, noticed. Dr. Lauren, have you had both of your shots?
No, I get my second one next week, and I'm the kind of less is more person. I wouldn't recommend anybody take anything until they feel it, just because you don't want to cover up something additional that could be going on. So you just got to know your body, and everybody's experience will be a little bit different. I've had a few people text me, and they were like, I had a fever of 99.8. And I'm like, but is that really a fever? So it's not to be snarky, but everyone's different. So, you have to go on your comfort level.
Okay. Dr. Lauren, I'm going to hit you with this. Well, let me ask you this first, Dr. Newby. Your private practice, because you have outpatient arm, you have the vaccine and have access. Are there other private practices similar to yours around the state or around Hampton Roads that also have the vaccine and are able to give the shots?
That's a good question. I actually know we were the first to get access to it, but I think one of the community health centers, I was on a Zoom call the other night, and I heard one of them say, I think it was Hampton Roads Community Health Center. I think they mentioned up there that they have access to it as well. But I think the thing is right now, and I would tell people this, I know my phone's been blowing up with calls about trying to get it. And I'm trying to just make sure people are aware that right now our biggest limitation is having enough vaccine to do anything with. So I was made to promise that I would take care of course, the 1As first and then start with the 1Bs. I still have some 1As they've asked me to do. We probably vaccinated a couple hundred people, probably about 250 or getting close to 300 people just in the last week and a half. But I'm almost through with my obligation to the public health department, so I can start really trying to get some of my higher risk patients done. But it's just access. It's really just access to it. But hopefully that will resolve in the next few weeks. And
you're also looking for volunteers.
Yes,
is that right?
Definitely.
To help? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the things with this is, because we get it from the federal government, of course, they don't reimburse us for the cost of the labor and all that. So, I'm really doing it because it's just it's something good to do. I mean, this is definitely a labor of love that I wanted to take on for obvious reasons. But it does take, I do have to pay my employees to do it. So anybody that's willing to kind of help out, I've worn out a couple of my nurses because if you talk about 300 people in like a week and a half, that's worn some of my poor staff out. So, we're looking for people, clerical people and people who are at least RNs, LPNs, medical assistants that want to volunteer some time to help out. I mean, because our job is to try to really get people vaccinated. And the faster we get people vaccinated, the quicker we can start reaching that herd immunity, which we're trying to look for in order to get back to some state of normalcy. So anybody that's willing to volunteer, I'd love to have you come on board.
You can go to fortnorfolkmedical.com/Moderna-volunteer. fortnorfolkmedical.com/Moderna-volunteer and sign up to that volunteer opportunity. And if you're just joining us, we're talking about the COVID-19 vaccine and giving you the facts with cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby and Dr. Lauren James, District Health Director with the Portsmouth Health Department. Our phone lines are lit up, so let's take a couple of calls. Alan joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Alan. You're on the air.
Yes, hi. And I have a question. One of the many contracted COVID and we survived it. So my question is, for those who got the COVID and recovered, when is it safe to take the vaccine? Is it necessary to take it, or what's the timeline looks like?
Okay, we'll get an answer. Thanks so much for your call. Which one, Dr. Lauren, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So It is not wise to get the COVID vaccine while you actively have symptoms. So we would say anybody who's tested positive, give it 2 weeks. And if you're asymptomatic, you can, try to get the vaccine. But research has shown that you do have about 90 days of immunity once you have contracted the virus. But research can change. But technically, it is safe to get it once you are asymptomatic. And even for those who are asymptomatic throughout, you still want to wait that 14 days from your original positive date.
Okay. Let's go to Vicki in Virginia Beach. Hi, Vicki. You're on the air.
Good morning or good afternoon. My question just is around which source do you trust? Because even with the CDC, for example, one thing they're telling you and then they change it the next day, and so the information doesn't seem to be consistent. For example, first they say make sure whichever vaccine you get between Pfizer or Moderna at that time, make sure the second dose is from the same manufacturer. Then they change it and said, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be from the same one. So that's a conflict of information, whether you should take pain relievers before or after your medication. One time they say yes, then they say no. So how do you know who to go to trust as the ultimate source? Because even Dr. Fauci seems to be changing his view. And I understand this whole thing is fluid and we got to move with it. But when it moves like that, when information changes, that's what makes people more skeptical. And I'll take my answer off the air.
Thanks for the call, Vicki. We appreciate that. And she makes a very good point, Dr. Newby.
Yeah, I got that one. So this is the thing. And I understand. I think what it boils down to is because the vaccine access was limited, they're just trying to get people vaccinated as best they can. And I definitely understand your point on this. This is the thing, though. I always say, as a former Duke graduate, in cardiology, I'm always been, I always go into the research. The research and what the data says, this is how we follow it. The issue became initially that when the studies came out, and that's what they're really basing things on. Moderna did their studies and got this result. The Pfizer people did their studies and got this result. Now, they were similar in terms of efficacy, and they are similar in terms of the actual messenger RNA process. Personally, although I did hear that they are saying that if you got one, you could get the other one, I'm still going based on the research. I want to make it a point that I got the Pfizer one first. I got the Pfizer one second. I think you can never go wrong sticking to the data. Now, the thing is, I'm not familiar, and Dr. James may know this, but I'm not familiar with them actually doing any research studies to show that if you mix them, that you still get the same efficacy. By definition, you would think you should, based on the fact that they are similar in terms of how they operate. However, I would say you can never go wrong with the data, sticking to the data, how it was originally designed and all that. That you can never go wrong with that. And what the data says is it was done based on the numbers they received, meaning the 95% efficacy was based on, the Moderna first and second shot at the timeline, because, you got two different timelines, too, between these vaccines. I think they were just trying to get people vaccinated, but Moderna was 28 days, Pfizer's 21 days. To me, I just soon stick to the guidelines and not necessarily deviate, and you can never go wrong with that.
Okay. And Dr. Lauren, or Dr. James, sorry, where should she trust? I mean, should you go to the CDC website? Should you go to the Virginia Department of Health website? I mean, who is keeping up with the changes and being most accurate, would you say?
That's a very good point that she brings up. And we have to remember this is the practice of medicine. So it is not a perfect or exact science. She sounded very informed when she posed her question. I totally agree with Dr. Newby. I would share at the health department, we do give cards, and I'm sure he probably got a card too. And we do like to continue with the same brand, because it's just a brand, but just for consistency and what we have seen. And it's also new And I will also share that usually VDH tries to update their data or their recommendations to follow CDC, but CDC takes, not that it's a but, CDC takes into account how the community is doing. So they know, like Dr. Newby said, that there's not a large amount of vaccine out there. So I think they're trying to give us the bandwidth to support those, in different options. Just like I'm sure everybody read about the CDC window that gave an option for a shorter quarantine. So the shorter quarantine does have decreased effectivity. So if you complete the whole 14-day quarantine, that's best practice. And then the shortened one doesn't have as quite the data, the numbers aren't as high for your decrease in transmission. But it is an option for those who, due to work or life circumstances, might not be able to take that,
full
14 days off. They might lose their job, lose their funds. So I think CDC does try to give us that latitude, and then it adds a layer of confusion. So I definitely empathize with the caller, and it's not an easy question, but I think you have to kind of base it in what makes sense and what the research says. So I will share at the health departments. I think across the board, most of us are trying to match up people with what they've been given the first dose of, Moderna,
right.
First dose, a second dose. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, let's go to Renee in Hampton. Hi, Renee. You're on the air.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
My question relates to the equity in administering this medication or this vaccine. I was just wondering because, it seems like I'm hearing more and more in the news and on the media that they're having movie stars and sports figures and physicians' wives and all sorts of individuals that have already had the vaccine that may not be in high-risk groups. I have a 97-year-old father who is desperately looking to take the vaccine, and we just can't seem to get him even seen or with an appointment. So we're trying to make a determination as to how the vaccine is being administered and, what is the equity in that administration of the vaccine.
Okay, thank you for that call, Renee. I want to play a clip from Governor Northam from his press conference yesterday that addressed that a little bit, and then I want to hear from our experts, if that's okay with you. Let's listen to the clip.
I want to talk specifically about data around race and ethnicity. It's really important to make sure that equity is built into the vaccination program and that you can see what's going on. So I directed the team to do more and to move faster. We are doing 3 things. First, on Monday, Health Commissioner Dr. Norm Oliver wrote to every clinician in Virginia and told them, collect this information, it matters for transparency. Second, we updated all of the relevant websites and customer-facing applications with these words. Please list your race, ethnicity during vaccine registration and at the time the vaccine is given. We ask because we want to ensure that our process for data collection and vaccine distribution is fair, equitable, and transparent to all Virginians. And third, I'm backing legislation from Delegate Lamont Bagby and Siobhan Donovan moving through the General Assembly that will make it a requirement to collect this information. It's the right thing to do, and it's a critical tool to provide you the transparency that you expect.
So, Dr. Lauren, he's talking about collecting the numbers so we know that demographically that the vaccine is being distributed and in the areas so that everyone has access to it. But also to Renee's point about people who are in the high-risk groups, who are in Group 1A and Group 1B, and people jumping the line, if you will, to get their shot, as opposed to those who are really in those high-risk groups who may be having trouble registering online, et cetera, et cetera. I know that there's been a lot of confusion about how people actually sign up for the shots. Can you talk about that process? And I know it's different in every jurisdiction.
Yeah. She had a very good question, very good point. I will share that Governor Northam is very dedicated to equity and how we distribute it. We have been asked all throughout the state to, when we get our allocation, so we do have to acknowledge that allocation is limited at this time, but when we get our allocation, half of that be dedicated to the Phase 1B, which is our, and any of the Phase 1As who haven't been vaccinated. But that is, our frontline essential staff and our vulnerable communities through age or chronic illness. And the other half of that, it should be 50-50 between those two groups. So the workers versus those with vulnerable conditions or based on 65 and up. And as far as, what was the second? I'm sorry.
Oh, we're just talking about making sure that the numbers, that the vaccines actually get into minority communities and other communities of people, and how that's done.
Okay, and I would say the good thing about the health department site, our health directors know the regions very well, so we know strategically what zip codes to put our sites in when possible. So that's something we look at before we set up our site. Now, scheduling, it has been very, very challenging. And to your point, some people don't do email, and that could be regardless of age. Some people have, they call and they're still unable to get through, depending on the health department. The region is working on standing up a hotline. So we do hope that eventually, hopefully next week, there'll be a hotline where you can call anywhere in Hampton Roads and be, connected with your health department or scheduling center. Mm-hmm. And at this time, we still are relying on people to go to their individual health department site and most likely call. I know the Portsmouth Health Department, we have a phone number as well as a red cap survey. It's a survey where you can put your information, your email. But once again, everybody doesn't have email or doesn't, want to operate through that mechanism. So we are trying to build out that bandwidth because, we want to make it equitable to everyone. So we just, ask for patience because it has been difficult getting scheduled, and also based on decreased allocation, the scheduling isn't robust at this point.
Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure that people understand, that the audience understands. It's a two-step process. You have to put in your information, your registration, if you will, which allows then the health departments to call you back or email you back, or in some way get in touch with you with your actual appointment. So just because you register does not mean you have an appointment. Am I correct in that?
Correct.
Okay. And so there is a two-step process. Renee, is your father in Hampton?
He's in Suffolk.
He's in Suffolk.
He's 97, and of course he has pre-existing conditions. He's, as a matter of fact, I think at one point Dr. Newby was his cardiologist. But he will be 98 in April, and he has been insistent. He's been trying to find a way to get. But the thing about it is too, he would prefer it to be administered in an office setting as opposed to going to a health clinic. He's just very afraid of the exposure. And so,
I was looking, there's a big article in today's Virginian Pilot that tells you city by city where you need to go and how that city's process works in terms of signing up. And they have every city except Suffolk. So I guess we need to do some research and try to figure out how to help you out with that. I wish your dad the best. And I don't know, have you been able to get in touch with his primary care doctor
we have, and he is not administering the vaccine, or at least that's what he was told a few weeks ago when he checked to find out whether or not that was a possibility, because I understand his hesitation. He has not been out much. He's just waiting to see what he can find, and the way he wants it found, I think is part of it as well.
I got you. Dr. Newby, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, just make sure the station has your name and your father's name. Okay. And a contact.
Okay, Lisa, can you collect that from her for us, please? And we can go from there. Dr. Lawrence, Dr. James, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I am the interim director for Western Tidewater, which does include Suffolk Health Department.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine. Into that citizens, request, there are pharmacies in Suffolk and throughout Western Tidewater and practices that have signed on to give vaccine, and it is coming, but it just comes down to distribution. We've had over 1,000 people call, and that's not even the amount of vaccine we have available to give out a week in that area. So it's just going to, be time, but we will try to, make sure that as soon as we get updated, we'll be able to update our site and share all those resources.
Okay, that's fantastic. So 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. What other questions do you have about the coronavirus vaccine? I have this question. Is it the same amount of dosage regardless of your size?
Yes.
So whether you're tiny or big, doesn't matter.
Yes. I know with the Moderna one for sure, because that's the one we give out. It's just a standard set dose. I'm assuming the Pfizer is the same, but I can't say to that, but I know Moderna is the same.
Okay.
And a couple of points I wanted to bring up real quick, and I know it's going to be a couple of questions, but I wanted to say this. In our office, the way we set it, fortunately, I have a very beautiful, smart wife who knows this stuff a lot better than I when it comes down to setting things up. And she actually made a point, and before Northam even made a comment about, collecting information on race and ethnicity, that she already set that up for us. So we already have that we're collecting with each patient we do, because she was concerned about making sure we, kept equity in line. So having somebody that you can trust to help set this stuff up is a big, it's an unimaginable help we can have. But one of the things I wanted to bring up as it relates to the vaccine that I know somebody, if they haven't asked yet, I'm going to say this because I know you're going to ask this question, is when you get it, I want you to know you can't just throw your mask away.
Yes.
We got to bring that up because this is what the deal is, so everybody understands. This vaccine, you have to allow your body time to create antibodies to fight an infection. The reason there's 2 shots involved is because they looked at the amount of antibodies produced after the first injection and the protection kind of relevant that you had, and then after the second. And it takes a few weeks for that to happen. So after the first injection, or one injection, and I think this is pretty comparable with both vaccines, they said you had about 50% protection rate. After the second one, weeks later, that's how it got up to 94. So, and even after that, we have not reached herd immunity if you've received the vaccine. So I don't want people to think, okay, I got a shot, mask be gone, social distancing be gone. That's not the way this works. You can still get the infection. And I've had some people who've gotten a vaccine, 2 days later they turn up COVID positive, all the vaccine didn't work. No, you haven't. I told you, you have to wear the mask. And this was back in December before we even had it. It was already known that you have to continue your social distancing mask guidelines. And some people, because, again, when they turned positive, but it wasn't the vaccine that made them positive, they caught the infection because either they were exposed or they were exposed going into getting the vaccine anyway. And meaning they had it going in to get the vaccine. It just didn't manifest itself till a couple of days later. But a couple of days is not enough to build your immune system up to an adequate amount to fight the infection. So I want to make sure people understand that piece. Yes. If you hear those stories about somebody getting an infection immediately after they got the vaccine, it wasn't the vaccine that did it. It was them being exposed at some point in fashion, and this was the manifestation of that before the antibodies got a chance to form.
Okay. The other question that we have here, one from Facebook, how effective is the vaccine against these new strains from the UK? Do we know yet?
That's a Dr. James question.
Thank you, Dr. Newby. So that is a very good question, and I know that it's on everybody's mind because the new strand is thought to be, it's more contagious. So we're still looking at it. We're still processing genotypes, and really until it hits our population, they haven't given any data. But once again, we know that today the new vaccine is our best tool. So that's what we're going.
Dr. James, let me ask you another question, too. When we talk about this distribution and where, you're going to have pharmacies and individual practices and then mass arenas, any place where you can go get these shots, is transportation also being taken into consideration for patients who may not have ready access to a car. And so, I mean, are these being placed on public bus lines, or is that a part of the mix as we're looking at where to do this distribution?
That's a very good point. So I think partnership is the word. So even if a site can't be on a local transportation route, we have to look at what pharmacies are, what clinics are. So just as Dr. Newby mentioned, the Hampton Roads Community Health Center. So it's just getting as many avenues as possible. So really what we're looking at is we want a partnership for it to be at health departments, at pharmacies, at local providers. And we hope that somewhere out of that, that whole network that people can find something that's accessible. I do know that there's some health departments, specifically Western Tidewater, they've actually been able to go on site at times and vaccinate certain populations that are at risk, but that's really just based on resources at the time, and it's not something that can be done routinely. But I would say the health departments definitely have that on their radar, and as resources and allocation improve, we hope to expand.
From there. Okay, let's see if we can get a couple more calls. And Ryan joins us from Hampton. Hi, Ryan. You're on the air.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
How are you?
Okay.
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Hey, so if this is redundant, I apologize in advance. My mother and father are over 65 but under 75, and they're Hampton residents. Virginia Beach has opened up their registration to anybody in 1B over 65. Is there anything that prevents us from kind of jumping localities? And in doing that, is there any risk in them getting like the first shot but not being able to get back in line to get the second shot? And I can take my answer off air.
Okay, thanks, Ryan, for the call. So he's asking, if you live in one city, can you go to another city in Hampton Roads to get your shot? Dr. James?
So we are a very transient community, so that does happen. And if that's what they feel comfortable doing, that's fine. I will share, I have an aunt and uncle who live in Hampton, and they said it was much easier signing up than what I've heard in my own communities. But to his point, each health department, I don't know that there is a requirement that you be in that locality, although it is tracked, but I haven't heard of anyone being turned away. And I know that we do try to give second doses to anyone who has had a first dose. So I wouldn't let that be a barrier. But I would ask, that he continue to look on the Hampton website, because I did hear that the Peninsula Health Department had a good mechanism of scheduling. But once again, I do know Centera's going to start mass vaccination events, potentially. So I don't know if that's what he's referring to. But I think we're all dedicated to serving Virginia, so I don't think they'd be turned away.
Okay, as long as they're a Virginia resident, that's what's most important. Let's see. Let's go to James in Chesapeake.
Hello.
Hi. You're on the air.
Okay, I see a lot of people wearing two masks. Does it help to wear two masks? I heard, on TV they said that two masks are required now.
Okay. Let me get an answer for that, because we're almost out of time. Thanks so much, James, for the call. I know people are double masking, Dr. Newby.
Yeah, I've not heard that. I mean, like anything else, it depends on the quality of the mask you're wearing. I don't necessarily, I could barely deal with the one I'm wearing now, but there are some masks that are better than others. The ones, I wear a surgical mask, which has pretty decent protection. But I think if you just wear like a scarf around your face, then you may want to double that one up. But I think, and some people are into the N95s, and that's what they want to wear. I think you have to do what you feel comfortable with. But I've not heard a mandate for two masks at all. As long as you have some facial covering, any facial covering is better than none. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see if I can get one more call in. Florence joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Florence. You're on the air.
Hi, I just want to tell you my primary care doctor is not Centura, but if your primary care doctor is Centura, I have neighbors and all, they can sign up through Centura, my chart, and they have been able to get shots. I'm 84. I'll just like a lot of other people have to wait health department.
Mm-hmm.
However, my friends and relatives around Charlottesville, they got their vaccines several weeks ago, so it really, and I don't think they're with Centura, that's just Martha Jefferson Hospital up there, so it's really very different in different parts of the state.
Yeah, I believe that is the case. Dr. Newby?
Yeah, I think there are some, Centera, of course, they have their mechanisms just because they're a big health organization, but I will give them this amount of outstanding credit. They have talked to me and partnered with me about, when I brought up an idea of having more of a mass clinic that we could create in the area, they were 100% in favor of it and would give all the support necessary to make that happen. I know they are doing mass vaccination programs. I think there's one this weekend they have. But they've also told me they would definitely partner with me to create a mass vaccination site. I talked to my church, First Baptist Butte Street, and they were on board to become a site. So I'm going to work with them to create that venue for those people who may not have access through their primary care's office. So that is forthcoming. But bear with us for a while because, again, just having access to the vaccine has been the biggest issue. But I think everybody's on board to try to make this work. I will have to say this has been a good community-wide venture as we're trying to get people vaccinated and take care of them.
Okay. Dr. James, you have the last minute because we literally are down to the last minute. Piece of advice you want to give folks.
So I just recommend that we all continue to stay informed. I know there's a lot of information, but please check your source. And also you can follow up with your primary care and your local health department. We are here as a resource, and please just be patient with us. The health departments aren't going anywhere. We will be here to vaccinate until we are not needed for that, and then we will shift back to our other duties. But we are so ready to offer this to the community, and thank you all for your time. Hearing and seeing everyone and continue to mask up.
Okay, thank you so very much. That is Dr. Lauren James and Dr. Keith Newby. Thank you both so much for the information you provided for us today. And if you want to volunteer to help out at fortnorfolkmedical.com/Moderna-volunteer, that's where you go and sign up. Dr. Newby's looking for some folks to help with administration and also with delivering of shots if you have those qualifications. That's at fortnorfolkmedical.com/Moderna-volunteer. And also you can check the local city websites, your city's website, and they will have links to all of the information that you need for your particular city or locality and how you can get signed up for your vaccine. That really is the easiest way. Also, if you go to the CDC website, that also is very helpful. So our goal today was to provide you with facts so you can make an informed decision for you and your family about taking the vaccine. If you have additional questions, please reach out to your healthcare provider or call the Virginia Department of Health in your area. And if you know of others who could use the information you heard today, share our podcast with them. Go to anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. Let's share correct information more rapidly than we share rumors. Next week on Another View, the Black Church and its role in the fabric of the Black community. A preview of the upcoming PBS documentary, The Black Church by Dr. Henry Louis Gates. Our theme music is an original composition made especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. The pandemic is not over. Wear your mask, wash your hands frequently, stay 6 feet or more apart, and be sure to join us again next Thursday at noon for Another View.